Welcome to The Power of Curiosity, an expert webinar brought to you by getAbstract. Thank you everybody for joining in. I said it before, we are even at about almost 700 people now who joined that webinar. My name is Ramona Maccinetti, and today I'll be talking to Stefaan van Hooydonk, the founder of the Global Curiosity Institute and the author of the best-selling book, The Workplace Curiosity Manifesto. Hi, Stefaan. Welcome to our session.
Thanks so much, Ramona, for having me. It's beautiful to see that there's so many people interested in, curious about curiosity.
It is indeed. Stefaan, you're consulting global corporations and leadership teams towards building a stronger curiosity muscle. I assume this is exactly why our audience is here today. You all are curious people at heart and looking for ways to make the most out of it, like personally and professionally. I'd like to point you to our chat quickly. Please feel free to post your questions in that chat for Stefaan. We will try to address as many of them as possible. So Albert Einstein, whom Stefaan is quoting in his book, said, "I have no special talents, I'm only passionately curious." I love that quote. Stefaan, what is the buzz with curiosity? Why is it so powerful?
Well, it's a beautiful question, and I think nowadays in the 21st century, we are starting to realize that the world is different from the 20th century. Also, recently in COVID, I think we've waken up to the idea that we're not fully in control of the world. That all the answers we thought we had are probably not really there yet. And for instance, there's this Survey Monkey that did some research during COVID because I realized that there's some companies were very successful in a certain industry, while other companies were not successful at all. And they went deep and they looked at data, and they found actually that it's both about curiosity as a company and agility. If you had those two, then during COVID times you were thriving rather than surviving. And if you compare a little bit the 20th century and the 21st century, then for me the 21st century is a century of ideas. If you compare a little bit, like say in a hotel, let's have an example from the hotel business, Marriott with Airbnb. It took about 80 years for Marriott to get about 700,000 beds in about 90 plus countries. Airbnb did it in 4. And if you're looking at the market capitalization now, Marriott is about $60 billion. Airbnb is about $80 billion. So, and that shows, I think for me, that it's a different ballgame altogether. The shelf life of companies is coming down. 50 years ago, companies were thriving for 50 years. Now it's barely 20 years. The shelf life of knowledge for individuals is coming down. So we need to be interested in growing and learning more than before. And I think that requires, or people are starting to realize that this requires a different way of managing myself, managing my team, managing my organization, and maybe embrace a little bit what I call the notion of startups. Startups are high on exploration, are high on curiosity. And by the time these startups become scale-ups and grown-ups, if they're not careful, they've lost that muscle. And we can talk a little bit about the whole how that aspect influences individuals. But basically, everybody I'm speaking to is saying we need new answers, we need new questions, and we need to create cultures for ourselves, but also for others to embracing this new world. And that's where curiosity fits in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would like to ask our audience about their take on curiosity. We have posted it in the chat. Please pull up menti.com and use the code 39047675. 39047675. We will see Mentimeter in a second. And the question for you who are joining us today is, what do you think are the benefits for a professional to be curious? While we are pulling up Mentimeter, you can already think about your answer. What do you think are benefits for a professional to be curious? So Mentimeter should be coming up in a second. Stefan, maybe while we are waiting, you can share an anecdote of your childhood. Were you a very curious child? Or is that something that you learned throughout your career or education?
I don't think so. I think I was a child like anybody else. But what I was lucky with that I had parents who were allowing me to be really curious. I
Mm-hmm.
remember my parents allowing me not to go to school because there was this great museum or this great exhibition opening up. And they said that's also important for your education. So they wrote little notes to school saying, oh, Stefan cannot come to school because of family reasons. And they drove me to the exhibition. So, and I think that also shows that curiosity is not only something from within, but it's also something from without. How is the environment supporting you with curiosity? So I think I've been lucky that way.
Okay. Thanks for sharing this. In the meantime, I got the note that Mentimeter is not opening up. I apologize very much for that technical inconvenience. So I would have loved to see your answers. Now I am asking the experts. Stefan, what do you think are the benefits for a professional to be curious? What is a curious professional more likely to accomplish?
Well, it's amazing that the benefits are absolutely numerous, and for an individual, if a curious individual learns faster, learns better, learns deeper than not so curious people. A curious professional makes more salary and makes a faster career than others. Has better relationships. Tends to have a more feeling of groundedness and resilience. So there's beautiful examples of benefits, but it's not only linking to the individual. If you're looking at curious teams, their diversity is much stronger. Productivity is higher. There's a bit better sense for continuous improvement, and people are more motivated to work with each other. And this also has to do with this relational part of being interested in others and what they think and what they are. And let's look at curious organizations. We all want to work for curious organizations, and that has the benefits of that is innovation, transformation, a good place to work, at resilience, customer focus, etc. Now, there was some research done by Harvard by Gina Francisco in 2018, and a beautiful piece of research, and she found three things related to the benefits, I think. First of all, curiosity is much more important nowadays than ever before. And that means that if the environment is not changing too much, you don't need to be curious. Look at an Eastman Kodak. For 100 years, they were able to basically produce and sell the same product. And then things changed. Only curiosity is relevant when the environment changes around us. Then we have to start learning much faster and we have to react to the environment. Another reason that Harvard found is that actually you can change the curiosity of yourself and of your environment. And the third dimension, which probably surprises many people, is although managers and leaders say they value curiosity, actually they often don't, they actually stifle it. And maybe we could talk, we could talk a little bit about leadership and curiosity later on. It's a wild thing. So, but the benefits are curious, and it's no wonder that people are waking up and are starting to come to webinars like this. 5 years ago, nobody was interested in curiosity.
Mm.
Now every
Yeah,
conference
definitely.
has a session on the topic, which is beautiful.
It looks like people have a love-hate relationship with curiosity, experiencing both negative and positive extremes. Either they are super curious or they're not, rather than having a steady rhythm to it. So what's behind that?
Well, it's interesting if you're looking at we think in words. And it's interesting to see if we follow the development of the concept of curiosity. Before the 1950s, curiosity was negative. Curiosity was all about nosy children putting their noses where they shouldn't be, or gossiping, or being looking through a keyhole and trying to figure out what's happening on the other side, that type of thing. So it was pretty much negative. And only after the 1950s, it became positive as it linked to entrepreneurship, as it linked to an Einstein discovering the universe, as it links to innovation, etc. While before it was difficult people. And still some, depending on what part in society we are, and also often what language and what culture we are in, it still has some remnants or not of that past culture. For instance, in the Polish language, if of course I don't speak Polish, but I was told that there's this saying in Polish: "Curiosity is the first step to hell," as if it's a bad thing. Or in French, you say "curiosity kills," and every language, or in English, we say "curiosity killed the cat," as if curiosity is a bad thing, gets you into trouble. We even have these. Even nowadays, we have Curious George, this little monkey, this cartoon figure, which and basically this this little monkey is always getting into trouble and always needs his master to get him out of trouble. So basically, curiosity in the title, Curious George, is also something negative, funny but negative. So that's this love-hate relationship with it, and I often encourage companies to say, okay, what definition do you have within your company, or what definition do you have within your family, within your herd? Is it more on the positive side, or is it more on the negative side? And if it's more negative, can you tweak it to something positive?
Before you mentioned like environmental factors to curiosity, what would be psychological factors which have an influence on one's curiosity?
Well, it's a beautiful question. Let's maybe look at this from the angle of what curiosity is not. If we're looking at the opposite of curiosity, and I'm sure everybody in the listener will already start thinking what is a possible answer to the opposite of curiosity. For me, it's conformity, and conformity has probably two different reasons. First of all, there's the conformity that we impose upon ourselves, because the world is complex and we want to simplify the world, and we want to make the world controllable and predictable and safe, etc. And because of that, we create habits and routines and even thoughts to actually conform the world towards us. And that's why we tend to have lunch with the same people, because we want to be in an echo chamber. Or that's why we're taking the same route to our office or to our favorite shops, because that's a routine that we tell ourselves, so we don't have to think about it anymore. But also that creates all kind of biases. For instance, confirmation bias. We're not allowing new thoughts to come in if they don't correspond to our view of the world. So that's one way of conformity. And then there's another way of conformity, is the conformity that the group imposes upon us. And we run with it because we want to be liked, we want to fit in, we want to be seen as a loyal member of our tribe. And that's why we're allowing, that's why we're not checking the status quo, that we're not checking the orthodoxy of things. That's why we're not always wanting to stick our necks out and ask basic stupid questions, because the group might not like it. And if you're looking through those two lenses, then suddenly the barriers of curiosity become clearer, because it has both intrinsic reasons why people are not curious, because they fear, or because they're into this routine, or because they lack knowledge. But it's equally also external reasons why people are not curious, because maybe managers don't allow curiosity, or organizations, or families, or society doesn't like curiosity to be happening. Often when I'm in workshops, people might say, well, I try something, or I suggest something, but then the people around me say, oh, we've done it forever this way, so let's just stay with the old way. Or a manager might say, great idea, try it in the weekend and let me know, because I pay you to do, I don't pay you to think, and then individuals, back to the intrinsic dimensions, they might say, maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm not senior enough, maybe I'm not seen as loyal if I suggest those things, so maybe I'd better shut up and do my little thing. And this conformity per se is nothing wrong, because it helps us to get through the day. but we have to realize it's always our base position. We're always drawn towards conformity. And curiosity is a little bit like an elastic band. Like we have to pull ourselves away from that conformity into the space of curiosity. And that's where learning lies. That's why learning requires effort. That's why we have to put away our day-to-day job and we have to start reading or learning or doing whatever. And a little bit of that pull, a little bit of that elastic band pulling gets us what I call narrow curiosity, gets us into getting better and asking questions about our profession, about the things we know. If we pull more, then we get into new territories. Requires more energy, but it also helps us to learn many more new things. So these are some barriers. And then maybe the biggest barrier for me is stress. A little bit of stress is good. A little bit of stress is getting out of our comfort zone into the zone of learning. Too much stress is paralyzing.
What exactly does stress do to our curiosity muscle?
Basically, too much stress is paralyzing. So we're stopped being curious because we live in the now. We're in a survival mode. We're into a flight. I just missed the other word. We're in flight mode or what's the other word? Fight and flight. Sorry, yes, we're into that mode. And curiosity is always dealing with tomorrow, which is always what could be in the future. When we're fully stressed, we're not going to ask basic questions. When we're overworked, we're not going to challenge the status quo. We're happy to get through the day. And that tells us also a little bit that curiosity needs space and time, and also intentionality. We need to be in this space we need to have some space and time and peace. That's why people in holidays are reading much more, are more interested in the world, in your relationships, and also exploring themselves, because they have this time and this space suddenly. While if you're in the stress of every day, then often people either don't allow it, or people don't allow it themselves to be curious, and that's a bit dangerous in the world which is changing, because after a while people realize that maybe they're not good for the company anymore, because they stayed in their status quo for so long.
Well, I guess the workplace is what it is. Obviously, you're more relaxed during your holidays. But coming back to the original thing that you said, you've mentioned before that curiosity is a muscle one can train. How can I be intentionally curious at work? That's also a question somebody just posted on the chat. How can I be intentionally curious? And isn't that actually something that's intuitive to us?
Well, like all mindsets, curiosity is something that we have control over. And when I'm talking about muscle, that means a muscle is something that you can get better at. And if you're not careful, we are going to stay in this bubble of conformity, and we're not going to really get out into the zone of learning and curiosity. I know many people who are learning all the time, even without the organization telling them, but there's probably even more people who are not doing that, because we always all kind of reasons why not to go the extra mile, read a getAbstract 15-minute abstract and really getting into learning, you know. So a strategy that I often suggest to people is in a 3-letter word, AIM, A-I-M. A stands for awareness, I stands for intentionality, and M stands for measurement. And first of all would be awareness. Where do I fit into this scale between curiosity and conformity? Am I more on the conformity side or more on the curiosity side? What type of an organization do I work? What is my society's preference for curiosity? Is it more on the negative side or more on the positive side? Do I show up with curiosity, or do I show up with judgment? Do I show up? Am I listening with the intent to fix, or am I listening with the intent to learn type of thing? So that awareness, how do I fit in? And we might also talk a little bit about world and others and self later on. And then once we know that, when we're how we're showing up, also maybe what are my triggers for stress? Am I clear about those? And then once we know that, we have an opportunity to do something about it. And that's what I fit into intentionality. Do I have a routine? Do I create this space and time, even in my busy life, to be curious, or to even plan it on my agenda? Being curious, being learning. Have I created a list of the things I want to know? Interestingly, curious has there's the research shown that if you just create a list of things that you're curious about, things that you want to find out, you're already going to prime your mind to explore those things. And they don't have to be earth-shattering things. It could be simple things that you just want to learn and you want to know. And you'll get to know that. So and then maybe some specific strategies. Well, maybe a general strategy could be prime your mind. Give yourself the gift of being curious about the world, about others and yourself. And when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, tell yourself, let me be curious about the world, others, and self. And for the day. And in the evening, when you're brushing your teeth again, you play back your little film and you ask yourself, was I curious about the world around me? Was I curious about people? Was I curious about myself, my biases, my beliefs, even my limiting beliefs? And then you might not be perfect, but you prime your mind and maybe the next day to do slightly better, because it links to so many benefits. And if you're maybe some specific strategies about curiosity about the world could be, next time you go to a bookstore, buy the book next to the book you want to buy. Surprise yourself. Or start to learn something completely new. When you're making your list, I'm sure there's going to be learning opportunities that you put in front of you. Maybe learn, or maybe try to identify something new to a point where you can share it with others. And then curiosity about others could be, Abraham Lincoln had a really good saying. He said, I don't like that person. I need to get to know him better. And when we don't like somebody, we have two strategies potentially available to us. Either we push away the person, we don't want to deal with that person, or we embrace that person. And we want to learn, so maybe not liking has also something to do with me. So maybe I'm going to, and with that in mind, I often suggest people, why do you try to have lunch at least once a week with a person who is not part of your inner circle? Somebody who's maybe further away from your thinking, from your being, and try to figure out what you can learn from that person. Also, with empathic curiosity, with curiosity about others, maybe rekindle your relationships. Most couples they separate not because they're fighting, but because they stopped exploring. They take each other for granted. And maybe with this empathic curiosity is being, how can you rekindle your curiosity about others would be one thing. And then curiosity about yourself is try to articulate your values, your superpowers, your purpose. And that's probably the more difficult thing, because we have two eyes to look at the world, to look at others, but we don't have eyes to look at ourselves. And although many people say they think they know who they are, I would reckon there's only about 10 to 15% of the people who really can look through all the self-talk and all the narratives that we tell ourselves of who we really are. So these will become some practical things. Surprise yourself, take the book next to the book, but also work on your relationship and be intentional. Plan for it on a day-to-day basis and take small steps.
Thank you for all those tips. Super interesting. What I like very much is spacing out time for curiosity in your calendars. If you feel you can afford to do that, that's really great. I want to catch up on some questions from the chat. There is a person asking if there are industries where curiosity is more accepted than in others.
That's a very good question. I think nowadays curiosity is making inroads in many industries. As I said, within industries you might have startups and you might have scale-ups and grown-ups. Typically, the startups are more curious. And then I've seen industries in the military who are extremely curious. I've seen industries in even in ministry environments, government who are really curious. But you would probably have a thought that would have less that. There are a number of companies, that's actually a great question, who have curiosity as part of their corporate values. So that might be a first step to think about. For instance, McKinsey, as the consulting company, have a beautiful value, is the obligation to dissent. So they really make sure that it's not only okay to have a different point of view, it's even required for you to make a career in the company. You have also other companies, you can look it up, who has, and then some companies are creating really beautiful processes and practices to be curious in terms of how to recruit people. Do you know that the use of the word curiosity has seen a 90% increase year on year in recruitment strategies in online advertisements? It doesn't mean that those companies are fully there yet, but at least they're recognizing that it's really important to focus on curiosity to recruit new people, because youngsters and new employees are really looking for this.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before that curiosity is not only linked to individuals, teams, organizations can also be curious or not, and also leaders have a huge opportunity here. What exactly is the relationship between curiosity and leadership? How do you enhance curiosity among your team members? How do you foster it within the organization? How would you do that?
Well, it's a beautiful question. Leaders often don't realize what an important shadow they're casting onto the team. And some leaders are really uplifting the team, while other leaders are more stifling it, as I said earlier, related to the Harvard research. When I was Chief Learning Officer for Cognizant, we did some number crunching around, and the hypothesis was, if a manager learns a lot, does it mean that the team also automatically learns a lot? And I think intuitively that makes sense. No, the manager kind of gives the example and the team would follow through. And actually, we've proven that with data. But we also realized the opposite is sadly also true. If the manager is not learning anything, the team falls flat also in terms of their learning behavior. So that already tells, if you're linking learning to curiosity, and there's a beautiful link between learning and curiosity, that if the manager doesn't learn, the team doesn't learn. And often what I also see when I'm doing research with managers is that about 90% of the leaders, when I'm asking them, do you think that curiosity is a good thing for an organization? They say 90% say yes, curiosity is really beautiful. If I'm then asking a follow-up question, how much are you inviting curiosity and innovation into your teams? Then only 50% of them say that they do. So it's a bit of theory and practice. Managers often are saying it's a great thing, but I'd rather have another manager deal with it because my team is all about efficiency, and therefore I'm not allowing for the curiosity to come onto the team. Also, when I'm looking at middle level, when I'm comparing middle level managers to first line managers and senior executives, middle level managers tend to underestimate the importance of curiosity by a factor of 4 when compared to first line managers and senior executives. And it's often not so strange because often they're literally stuck in the middle. They get these objectives from senior management and they have to run an efficient as possible game. And they don't have time to change things along the way, because if you're successful, everybody joins in the success. If you're not successful, it's quite a lonely game. And also, in quite a number of cultures, the manager is not allowing him or herself to show up curiously because, for instance, not knowing in many cultures is seen as bad. I, as a manager, am paid more than the employees, and I'm supposed to have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, interestingly, research has shown that if the manager says that he or she does not know, he or she gets more respect from the team than if he or she is trying to figure out something that might or might not be true. And at that moment, the manager has the opportunity to invite the team to co-create. And that raises then suddenly the innovation, and that raises more engagement and more productivity of the team. So somehow, if we're talking about AIM, awareness, intentionality, and measurement, it's up to the manager to do double of that. Awareness to him or herself, but also awareness towards the team that he or she is managing, which is beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the look sideways. I'm just monitoring the chat, and I have to say thank you to the audience for sending in your questions. This is amazing. Here's somebody asking, in terms of psychological safety, what can organizations do to help people access their innate curiosity?
Well, it's something that I found recently, that actually just psychological safety in itself is not really increasing the performance of a team. But psychological safety has to be combined with allowing minority voices to be heard. So psychological safety is a great thing, but if everybody's feeling psychologically safe, but the people on the sideline, the minority, are not allowed to voice their ideas, then psychological safety is not leading to improvement in performance for the team. So what you can do as a team leader is, for instance, is allowing everybody to speak. And not just having the louder voices in the team to speak all the time. To also allow people that are on the fringes to have ideas, because they often have beautiful ideas. Just to create an environment where, for instance, the manager says, "I don't know, let's chip in together," or allowing everybody to speak and create processes where there's opportunity for learning. I think that's also beautiful. Learning not only for the current role, but also learning for the next role, and allowing and empowering the individual to decide what he or she wants to learn, him or herself, which is often not happening in an organization. But luckily, it is happening in quite a number of organizations. So there's many things a manager in an organization can do to get really better at this combining.
Which is good news, I guess, that there are opportunities. Here's another very interesting question. How do you measure curiosity? Is it a gut feeling, or are there actual ways to measure quality and quantity of curiosity?
I forgot to talk about AIM. Indeed, we have awareness, intentionality, and measurement. Now, there's two ways to measure. First of all, one way could be a qualitative measure. I've created a number of diagnostics where people can actually find out about their curiosity of the world, others, and self. So that's a questionnaire type of an assessment that people can follow. But and you can do that on my website, globalcuriosity.institute.com. But there's other ways. You can ask people, am I showing up with curiosity or with judgment? Am I showing up with conformity or judgment? You can ask your peers, you can ask your boss, you can ask your subordinates, you can ask your teenage daughter, whether for the last week, did I show up, did I listen to you, or didn't I listen to you? And I think curiosity is all about asking better and deeper questions. And I think a beautiful question is, how did I do as your father, as your child, as your boss, as your peer, as your partner? ask that question. It puts you a little bit in a vulnerable spot because you don't know what the answer is going to be, but it's such a revealing question. And I've not heard anybody where the answer was not revealing, because the moment you put yourself, you ask already that question, you're allowing that vulnerability to sip in for a couple of seconds and see what happens. Even if you're like me, 55 years old, asking my mother, how am I doing as your son, is still extremely valuable. And she might be taken aback a little bit. In my research with managers, there's only about 23% of first-line managers who are asking to their employees, how am I doing? They're very good at giving feedback, but they're not very good at asking feedback in return of their subordinates. And I think they're missing something. They're missing a gift to themselves. And then when you're looking at middle managers, it's about 46% of people that are asking, how well am I doing? So that's maybe, these are some strategies to measure yourself, how curious you are.
Okay. So asking questions would be one thing, but here also somebody is asking, can you comment on the link between curiosity and truly effective listening skills? So asking questions, but also listening.
It's a great question. Good curiosity leads to better relationships. Even better relationship with people that don't share your common points of view, like different political parties and things like that. If you're genuinely interested, if you're genuinely curious, you put away your ego and you're trying to find out how the other person is, or what your person is all about. So you're moving. I mentioned already earlier, no, the listening to fix, or listening and showing how smart you are, or listening for your conformity, and on the other side, it's listening to learn and being genuinely interested in the world. We haven't spoken really about empathic curiosity yet. That's one of the three objects for me of curiosity, is genuinely interested in the other person. And if you're opening up to that other person, you're going to have much better relationships. You're going to be interested in the person and continuously be interested in the person. So it's a beautiful thing to do. Let's have lunch with that person who has different ideas from me. Let's have lunch with that neighbor, or let's have a chat with that neighbor who looks a bit different and has a different religion, etc. Because that really helps us to become more curious. And the first time it might be a bit difficult, but that's part of the muscle again. The second time it might be easier in talking to that perfect stranger again.
Stefaan, here comes a trick question. What could an employee do when managers want to keep knowledge to themselves or assume they know everything?
Well, that's a great question. There are a number of strategies that people can do. And first of all, I would say try not to do it all by yourself. That's one thing. Try to find other people around you who feel the same way, and then another dimension might be first of all, try to work from the inside. It's easier when you're trusted and when you're an insider to influence your environment than when you're perceived as an outsider. But if you're an employee in the team, of course, you're already seen as an insider. And then another dimension might be, let's think about the awareness. Try to figure out, why is this manager that way? Is there a certain level of insecurity in the manager? Has he or she been maybe promoted too fast, or does he sits more in this conformity zone and is not allowing curiosity from happening in the team? And at that level, maybe you can try to figure out a strategy to focus on curiosity and not fear. Maybe take away the fear of the manager, that maybe not allowing suggestions might be maybe the manager might think is counterproductive. Maybe have a chat with the manager why this could not be true. So it's not easy, but it's not impossible too. And also probably look at from the long haul. Don't try to change it in a single day, but maybe have a strategy to change it over time. When you have a performance discussion with that manager, maybe invite yourself to give polite feedback with a lot of care and a lot of kindness, saying, I think our relationship could be better if you would allow me to speak up a little bit more, those type of things. So don't stay away from the discussion, I'd say, but also try to understand it from the other perspective and the managers.
That's very good advice. Thank you. Here is another very personal question. As an introvert, especially, how do you overcome the fear of rejection when expressing interest in others with empathetic curiosity?
I think that curiosity has not so much to do with introvertedness or extrovertedness. I've seen extremely introverted people being beautifully curious. There might be less outgoing when being with others, but there's also something like curiosity about the world, and there's something like curiosity about ourselves. So if you want to get better at curiosity about others, for introverted colleagues, I would probably say focus on your curiosity of self. Try to understand yourself more and deeper, and try to find out where this introvertedness might come from. And look at your deeper, and sometimes it's at an unconscious level, and sometimes you have to talk to people to figure it out. But that might be a strategy for you to be curious about, why am I introverted? Is it because when I was young, somebody told me that I was not smart? Is it because it's just inborn? Is it a combination of many different things that made me nowadays introverted? Is it because maybe people told me early in my career that I should shut up, and I've just played that tape all along? So find that out, and then see where it leads you, and then try to figure out a strategy to overcome it.
So curiosity is the source of everything.
I don't think so. Anything.
Okay, I have one final question because our time is unfortunately almost up. How can organizations best reward curious behavior?
Well, the one single thing that comes into my mind is the acceptance of failure. That's probably, there's more things to say about it, but to be really short, create a culture, create an environment where it's okay to fall on your face, where falling on your face is not seen as a red mark in your career plan, but a positive step. Because it shows that you care, and it shows that you're learning all the time, and it shows that you're willing to fall on your face and to learn and to ask the basic questions. That, I think, it would be a great way for a company to start, because you see, for instance, startups, they're 4 times more ready to learn from mistakes when you compare them to grown-ups. So they still have that mentality of it's okay to be wrong and to fail and to learn, etc., which grown-ups often have forgotten.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you so much for your insights. Also, thanks to our audience for being here today and for your many, many great questions. I want to mention that you will receive the recording of this event in the next days. And to learn more, please make sure to grab the summary and also grab the book, The Workplace Curiosity Manifesto, and take the opportunity to find out about your own curiosity profile via this curiosity assessment, which Stefan mentioned in the beginning. For more relevant content on today's topic, check out our channels, Curiosity, Creativity. There's also Group Creativity. And the author's contact, in case you want to ask your questions directly to Stefan, it's Stefaan@globalcuriosityinstitute.com. Stefan with double A at globalcuriosityinstitute.com. We are very much looking forward to hearing and seeing you again on one of our future webinars. I want to say goodbye for today. Bye-bye, Stefan. Thank you for being here and for all your great answers.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So everybody have a great day and stay tuned for our next session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Stay curious.